This is the Strong as a Mindset podcast, episode number 166. If you've ever said, if I can't do it perfectly, why bother? Or if you let one off-plan decision turn into a free-for-all, this episode is for you. Today, we're talking about when healthy eating backfires and how to loosen your grip so food stops feeling like a test and starts feeling like a normal part of your life. This is the Strong as a Mindset podcast, where you'll learn how to build both a strong body and a strong mind by eating, moving, and thinking. I'm your host, physician, personal trainer, certified health coach, and certified life coach, Carrie Holland. Hey, how are you? What's new? What's good? So, what's good here? We are going to talk about another common phenomenon I see often with my clients. It is especially common among my high achievers, perfectionists, and people who are used to holding themselves to incredibly high standards in nearly every part of their life. And maybe you've run into this too. And that phenomenon is when healthy eating backfires. So what exactly does that mean? It's when the rules that you've imposed upon yourself around food are so strict, so rigid, or so all or nothing that the very thing that you're doing in order to feel better actually ends up making you feel miserable. And sometimes it even results in you going in the opposite direction. So instead of food being something that fuels you, or instead of food being something that creates connection, food becomes more like a part-time job. It becomes a constant mental checklist that you're terrified of messing up, and it takes up way too much space in your brain. You start measuring success by how perfectly you can follow your plan instead of looking at how your body feels or how well your plan fits into your actual life. And here's the kicker. The more you try to control every single bite of food, the more your brain fixates on the foods that you told yourself you can't have. It's crazy. You end up thinking about food more instead of less. And at that point, it shifts from caring for your body, whether that's from yourself, from other people, or from the perfectionist version of you that only allows you to feel good as long as you never mess up. And that is totally exhausting. It means you go to dinner and immediately scan the menu for the one thing that won't break your plan. It means you can't have birthday cake with your kids without running the mental math to determine how you'll make up for it later. And over time, the joy gets totally squeezed out, and it's replaced by pressure, tension, and a constant low-level fear of messing up. So having that much control ends up doing exactly the opposite of what you intended. And when you finally do break one of your rules, because those rules were so hard to follow in the first place, it's like a dam giving out. And all the pressure you've built up comes flooding out in the form of overeating, guilt, or giving up and throwing in the towel altogether. And then here is where it gets even stickier. The emotional fallout from that one misstep can be way more damaging than the food itself. So it's not so much about the food, but what you do and say to yourself. You start stacking shame on top of frustration, and that often leads to overeating. So you end up perpetuating more of the behavior you're trying to avoid altogether. And before you know it, what started as a single choice snowballs into a weekend, a week, or even longer of being totally off the rails because you've convinced yourself that the streak is broken and there's no point in trying again until Monday. So that is why, if you have ever thought to yourself, if I can't do this perfectly, why bother? Or if you've ever let one off-plan decision turn into a weekend free-for-all, I think this episode will help you because that pattern is exactly what we're trying to break. All right? So let's go. So first, let's talk about why, at first go, it might seem like having rigid rules around eating would seem like a good idea. Because your set of rigid rules might feel like exactly the right move at the outset. So for many perfectionists, control is safety. Control is comfortable. So in a world where there is plenty of unpredictability with your schedule, your family, your kids, all the things, food becomes the one thing that you can tightly manage. Food becomes a way to create order, to prove discipline, and to feel like you're doing something right. And so the appeal of a very clear rule, like no sugar, no flour, no dairy, no dessert, no wine, those rules feel safe and they feel measurable. You either pass or you fail. And there's a very real relief that you get from keeping something like that black and white. There's comfort in knowing your exact boundaries. There's no gray area. There's no messy middle ground to negotiate. And you lose nuance. So your decision is already made for you. No sugar, period, for example. And for someone used to high standards and constant decision-making in all the other parts of her life, that kind of rigidity and clarity might feel like a mental break, even if it comes at the expense of flexibility. And to add to this, there is often a false sense of security layered in there. It's a voice in your head that says, if I am strict, I will succeed faster. And a lot of my clients justify their strict rules by saying they need it to be a certain way or else. And it makes sense. These women are used to being disciplined in so many other parts of their lives, like their schedule, their workouts, their career, their family, all of it. So being just as strict with food feels like a natural extension of who they are. And you know what? At first, it works. It works really well because there's novelty, there's newness, there's motivation. It feels good to be on point. You have certainty with that rigidity. You know exactly what to eat, when to eat, and how much to eat. You don't have to make decisions in the moment. You just follow the rules, your very, very strict rules. But the problem is there's no room for the actual way your life works because oftentimes, real life is unpredictable. And that means travel plans change. Kids get sick, dinner invitations come up, or you just want to have a piece of birthday cake at a party. And when you leave yourself zero flexibility for those moments, you're setting yourself up to either feel deprived when you stick to it or guilty when you don't, and it becomes a lose-lose situation. That constant tension makes it harder to stay consistent in the long run, and it robs you of the opportunity to practice making thoughtful, in-the-moment choices. There's no choosing, there's no pausing, there's no thinking with intention, there's just following rules until you can't anymore. So I had a client who traveled a ton for work, and she had an incredibly regimented plan for how she ate when she traveled. And when she nailed it perfectly, she'd message me with so much pride, and she should have been proud of her consistency. But the moment she had even one thing outside of her intricate, pre-packed food plan, that was the end of it. She'd spiral, and that one piece of candy or that one half of a cookie turned into handfuls of chips, loads of mini candy bars, and an entire food bender. She didn't have a plan for what to do if she landed at 90% consistency, so the only other option in her mind was to drop all the way to 0%, and it totally backfired. So now let's talk about why healthy eating can backfire. And there are a number of reasons for this. That level of rigidity comes at a cost. So first, from a physiologic perspective, your body can only take so much restriction before it freaks out. Chronic undereating and strict elimination raise your hunger hormones like ghrelin, and they lower fullness hormones like leptin. And that means your cravings intensify over time instead of lessening. And that's when fatigue sets in, irritability spikes, and it gets harder and harder to white knuckle your way through it. And psychologically, the forbidden food effect kicks in. And that means the more you tell yourself you can't have something, the more you want it. That feeling of scarcity and can't have, it increases your desire. And so the same foods that you've outlawed becomes the ones that you laser in and fixate on. And when you finally do allow yourself to have them, it's not just a little. You go overboard in a Last Supper kind of way. Like, hey, I don't know when I'm going to have this again, so I'm going to eat it up like it's the last time on earth I'll ever have it. And then there's also the identity piece to this. When you have rigid rules about eating healthy, that creates a very fragile self-image. And it's one where one slip up feels like you've broken your identity as a disciplined or healthy eater. And that's because your identity of being disciplined or healthy hinges on you never breaking your own rules. When your identity is built entirely on flawless execution, even a single slip can feel like a personal failure. You get into a space where one imperfect choice erases all of your progress, which makes that identity super easy to shatter. And when that identity feels shattered, it can cause the pendulum to swing fast and furious in the total opposite direction. And that will often lead to overeating or binging, which will not just undo your physical progress, but also your mental confidence. And mentally, that spiral is real. It is often rooted in perfectionism and all or nothing thinking. And when your sense of success hinges entirely on you following your plan without a single misstep, one break of your rules can feel like proof that you've lost control or failed completely. And that kind of thinking fuels a chain reaction that goes like this. I'm a failure. I always mess up and I can't be perfect. So why even try? And to be totally clear here, it is rarely about the actual food itself. The real damage comes from the meaning you attach to it, the belief that a single imperfect choice defines your worth, your discipline, or your ability to reach your goals. And that kind of self-judgment will do more harm than the slip-up itself because it will erode your confidence and make it that much harder to get back on track. So as an example, I had a client who decided that she was going to allow herself one bite of dessert every night. That's it. One bite and nothing more. And for a while, it worked. Until one night, she decided to have an entire scoop of ice cream, a normal serving size, and that turned into a total dessert bender. And she didn't stop because, as she put it, I saw it and I couldn't resist it because I haven't had it in such a long time. And that right there became an opportunity for us to talk about moderation, slowing down, checking in with hunger and satiety cues, taking sweets off of a pedestal, and staying with herself through cravings instead of going into autopilot mode. And the point here is that sometimes when we eat too healthy and we don't practice having foods that we truly enjoy, it backfires. You can get into a space of deprivation and scarcity that ultimately leads you to overdo it once you finally do break down and have the food that you've been overly restricting. All right, so now that we've talked about why rigid, healthy eating might seem like a good idea and why it actually backfires, let's dive in and talk about some red flags. So these are some things that I've picked up on over years of coaching women around this. And so here are some red flags that I watch for to suggest that you might be overly rigid with your healthy eating. So first, you celebrate 100% perfect weeks like a badge of honor. So let me be clear when I say this. There is nothing wrong with doing a good job. And there's also nothing wrong with being proud of the work that you're doing. However, when you follow your plan with 100% spot on perfection and make a really big deal out of it, most likely that means that you're not enjoying yourself. And it also likely means that you're overly restricting yourself, and that is not going to be sustainable. So 100% perfect is not bad, but it's not real life. And when you get too caught up in getting 100%, it can signal that you're tying your worth and your success to perfection, which is exactly what we're trying to avoid. All right, and another red flag that I have seen in my clients is that they go radio silent after going off plan because they don't want to tell me what's happening. So for you, this would be like skipping a follow-up with your trainer, or avoiding your running group, or dropping out of an accountability challenge because you don't want to admit that you've fallen behind. And then what you've got is shame piled on top of falling off your plan. And that makes it that much harder to re-engage instead of admitting that you're having a hard time and need support. And then another red flag is when you start to feel restless, twitchy, or even weighted down by anxiety until you can't tolerate it anymore and you finally crack. And that is when the floodgates open, often leading to days of choices that take you farther and farther away from your goals. It's that gnawing feeling where food is taking up way too much space in your brain, and it becomes harder and harder to focus on work, relationships, or anything else. And by the time this break happens, it's less about hunger and more about releasing pressure. And that release often results in choices that are completely the opposite of your original intent. And then sometimes it even goes beyond day-to-day habits. I had one client who went so far as to leave a vacation early because nothing fit into her plan. And this is an extreme but telling example of how rigidity can box you into a life that's so controlled, it cuts you off from meaningful life experiences. And when we were unpacking this, my client told me this, I wrote it down. I'm never going to be able to live in normal society at this rate. But I want to be the kind of person who can have a big salad and a slice of pizza, who can get ice cream with my kids. But I'm afraid if I let go of the rigidity, it will all fall apart. And that's the thing. That's the super sticky part. Rigidity feels safe. It feels safe because it removes uncertainty and it keeps you boxed into familiar territory. But it's a false safety. And it only works as long as nothing unexpected happens. But again, that's not life, because life is unpredictable and full of the unexpected. And the deeper issue here is that often you don't trust yourself enough to make choices in a middle ground, especially when the unexpected happens. And building that trust, that is where the real work is. So that means learning how to navigate gray areas and unexpected situations without panicking. It means knowing that you can have a cookie without it turning into a free-for-all, and being able to adapt when your life or your schedule throws you a curveball. It's also about developing the confidence that you can handle both the planned meals and the spontaneous ones and still feel in control. And when you do that, food will stop feeling like an all or nothing test and start feeling like a normal, manageable part of your life that doesn't take up so much of your brain space. Okay, so now, how do you do that? How do you loosen your grip on eating healthy, but do it in a way that you don't lose all of your progress? Okay, so this is the complicated one, and here is where planned flexibility comes in. And planned flexibility, just as it sounds, it means that you decide ahead of time where and how you're willing to bend your structure. Not break it, but bend it. Planned flexibility, I consider it a framework. It is not a free-for-all. So you can think of it as setting intentional pressure valves in your plan so you can release some of that all or nothing tension before it builds up and causes a total break. So by knowing in advance where you'll give yourself wiggle room, you're practicing making choices in a middle ground on purpose, which makes it less scary and more automatic over time. Planned flexibility also means shifting from rigid rules to more flexible guidelines that are less all or nothing. For example, aiming for protein at every meal instead of insisting on exactly 25 grams every time. And you're zooming out to look at the week or month as a whole instead of obsessing over one day or one meal. And it's also about reframing your slip-ups as data instead of failures. Because this is not about avoiding missteps. That is not real life. You are going to mess up. We all do. And while you can do your best to prevent mess ups, it's actually more important to be willing to learn from them when they inevitably happen. Okay, so the 5 tools I'm going to share next, these are all examples of planned flexibility in action. Okay, so first is the 80-20 rule. This is one of my own go-to rules that I live out for myself. So 80-20 is very simple. It means that 80% of your meals support your goals and 20% are for enjoyment, spontaneity, and real life. And you can make it 90-10 if you want. I don't care about the exact number. But the idea here is to keep it reasonable so that the majority of the time you are on plan. But you also leave room to live your life and indulge every now and then without going overboard. Okay, so next tool, one decision at a time. I have mentioned this tool a few times, but it bears repeating because I love it. That means each food choice you make is independent of the one before it. So if you just ate your weight in Cheetos, it does not mean the next food choice you make has to be a bag of M&Ms just because you ate those Cheetos. You make each food choice on its own and truly live out that one choice does not dictate the next. And this is meant to keep you from the whole, I've blown it once, I might as well keep blowing it, and I'll start over again on Monday cycle. Okay? Your next tool is if-then planning. So that means you use a bit of forethought and come up with guardrails for yourself for when the unexpected happens. So I will say this here, and I will say this for forever, because I truly believe it to my core. You can have a plan, no matter what. Really, you can. And if-then planning enables you to be ready for whatever comes your way. And I am fully aware that you may not be able to pull out your crystal ball and anticipate every roadblock that might come your way, but honestly, that doesn't matter. You can still have an if-then plan regardless. And it might look like, if I'm traveling and I can't find my usual protein option, then I'll choose the best available and move on. Or if I can't find a salad on the menu, I will ask for a double serving of the vegetable of the day. Or I will have dessert, but not appetizers when I go to dinner with my book club on Wednesdays. And the point here is that you can always make some decisions so that you're walking into any situation prepared. You can have a plan, okay? And then another tool to consider is a stretch meal. So this is where once a week or once a month, whatever you decide, you intentionally choose something that's outside your usual plan. But here's the key. You choose it and you practice staying present for it instead of zoning out. So maybe that's pasta at your favorite Italian place or dessert at a friend's house. You choose it. And then you practice staying with yourself. And that means slowing down instead of inhaling the food in front of you, noticing the taste and the texture of what you're eating, and checking in with yourself midway to see if you've had enough. And the goal is to enjoy the food for real without sliding into autopilot or letting it trigger an all or nothing response. And then one other tool to help you loosen your grip is to debrief without drama. So this is taking a very simple but useful approach to the missteps that you have while you establish healthier eating. That means after you make an off-plan choice, you ask yourself, all right, what happened? Why did it happen? What do I want to do next? Maybe you grabbed fast food on your way home because you skipped lunch at work and you were hangry. When you go back and debrief, you own your choice, but you also look for the learning opportunity so you have a different outcome next time. So now you know that packing an easy to eat, protein heavy snack is essential so you don't get overly hungry. And the goal with this tool is to gather information you can use, not punish yourself. And what you're doing is being curious instead of self-critical. All right, so now that I've given you some logistics or the how, let's talk also about how to think. Because the strategies like 80-20 or if-then planning, those are one thing, but that's only a small piece of overcoming healthy eating that is too rigid. We need to talk about how you're thinking about this if you truly want your relationship with healthy eating to change. And the biggest shift you can make is to move from perfection to pattern, or from it's ruined thinking to it's just one choice and I can choose differently next time. So remember, one meal is just that, one meal, and it doesn't have the power to make or break your progress unless you give it that power. And that shift is totally freeing because it takes the pressure off every bite of food you put in your mouth. And the idea is for you to see that progress comes from the sum of your choices over time, not from nailing every single one perfectly. And it also keeps you from falling into the start over again on Monday trap, where one imperfect choice essentially wipes out days or weeks of progress in your mind. And here's another mindset shift to consider. Instead of looking back and asking yourself, was today perfect? You can ask yourself instead, am I headed in the right direction this week? Because zooming out like this helps you look at the bigger picture and keep up momentum, even when your day-to-day is variable and some days are better than others. So it's about noticing overall habits and progress instead of obsessing over isolated moments. And when you look at the broader trend, you can identify patterns and make small adjustments and see that one off day does not erase an entire week of mostly healthy choices. So, am I headed in the right direction this week? That's it. And then another huge mindset shift to consider is separating your self-worth from your food choices. And this is a big one. So please really hear this. What you eat is not a reflection of your value as a person. You are not good because you ate a salad, and you are not bad because you had dessert. Those labels just keep you trapped in shame, and they make food into a test that you either pass or fail. And remember, food is fuel, it's connection, and yes, it's for enjoyment, but it is not a moral scorecard. So when you stop tying your identity to every single bite of food you eat, you will stop worrying about whether you're being good or bad. You'll just be eating without all of the drama and labels attached to yourself. And then next, when we're talking about goals, another mindset shift to consider here is making a goal of how you want to feel, not just how you want to look or how much you want to weigh. So that means instead of obsessing over a number on the scale, you connect your eating choices to the quality of your life. And so that means asking yourself things like, how's your energy throughout the day? Are you steady or are you crashing? How's your mood? Are you calm, patient, less irritable? And how's your performance in workouts or even in your daily life? Are you stronger? Are you moving more easily? Are you feeling less winded? So when you start linking your food choices to the more tangible everyday outcomes, you shift the focus from chasing a number or chasing some aesthetic ideal to building a way of eating that supports how you actually want to live. And that will be much more sustainable. All right, here's what I want you to walk away with. Healthy eating is supposed to make your life better, bigger, and fuller, not smaller. I really do see healthy eating as a tool to fuel your body, support your energy, and make your days better. When I made the shift from mostly processed food to mostly whole foods, I noticed so many improvements. My lifts in the gym were way better. I had more energy instead of hitting an afternoon slump, and I just felt good. Lunch didn't have to be a sandwich and chips like I had done for decades just because that's what lunch is. I learned to choose what made me feel good instead of what looked perfect on paper. And that meant still having an occasional cookie or a serving of Cheetos. And I practiced doing it without going off the rails. And that made all the difference in making that shift stick. I showed myself that eating healthy did not mean giving up fun foods altogether. And I'm still doing it. I'm still going. And just as healthy eating can be a tool, it can also be misused and turn into a weapon against yourself if your healthy eating is rooted in rigidity and perfectionism. Remember that perfection creates fragility, where one misstep can shatter what you're building. There's safety in sticking to a rigid, healthy eating plan, but remember, it's a false sense of security that eventually your brain and your body will not be able to uphold. But on the other hand, flexibility creates sustainability. And more importantly, it creates freedom. Flexibility with your healthy eating allows you to adapt without losing momentum. So you can bend without breaking and going off the chain. So you can keep moving forward when your life doesn't go exactly according to plan. So that your way of eating becomes something you sustain for the long haul. And when you let healthy eating expand your life instead of shrink it, you make space for spontaneity and joy and living your life alongside discipline and consistency. You don't have to choose between being on or being off. You're just living. And you not only live, you thrive in the middle where your choices work for your health, for your schedule, and for the life that you actually want to live. And if you want help with this, let's go. If your perfectionism around food has you stuck in a rigid all or nothing cycle, this is exactly the kind of work we do in coaching. We find your middle ground, we build trust in your decisions, and we create a way of eating that actually works in your real life. Check out my website, send me a message at www.carriehollandmd.com/contact, and let's talk about how coaching will help you loosen your grip without losing your goals. All right? Thank you again for hanging out with me, and I'll catch you again next week. Hey, if you want to build muscle but don't know where to start, I've got you covered. Head over to carriehollandmd.com/buildstrength and download my free guide to help you maximize your strength training. Inside, you'll find the essential exercises for building muscle, plus simple 1, 2, and 3-day workout plans that you can follow with just dumbbells and a bench. You'll also find strength training tips to help you train smarter and see real results. My goal is to help you get strong, and this strength training guide will help you do it. Go to carriehollandmd.com/buildstrength and check it out. Thank you for listening to the Strong is a Mindset podcast. If you want to learn more about how to build both a strong mind and a strong body by eating, moving, and most importantly, thinking, check out carriehollandmd.com.